406.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the 411 from 406. My name is Chewie, and I'm joined once again by my brother from another mother, Mr. Pip. How are you, sir?
Hey, man, I'm here. So I'm doing fantastic. Things are good here. And I'm excited to get back into the podcast, not just to be able to do it and to get a chance to talk with you, but mostly to cover some new content. We've been pretty Star Wars heavy for the past couple months, and I'm ready to get into some new stuff.
Yeah. So we, you can go back, you can listen to the archives. Episode 71 was our deep dive into Revenge of the Sith, which obviously kind of finished off our prequel review, which I had a really good time doing that. But I would agree with you. I am looking forward to moving away from a galaxy far, far away and covering some new ground. That's not to say that we won't come back to Star Wars, because we certainly will, I'm sure. But I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion. This was a topic that I threw at you, so I will let you tell the audience what we're talking about tonight.
Yeah, so to kind of stick with some of the themes that we've had in the past, we decided to go with another 6 through 10 episode. So we did a top 5 on this topic a while ago. Do you happen to know which one that was off the top of your head?
I do. That was episode number 27. So a long time ago in podcast. It was released on September 22nd, 2020.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Man, we've been doing it that long. Jesus Christ. That's cool. Yeah. So the topic tonight is the top 6 through 10 favorite video games of all time. So we're kind of trying to, again, deviate from Star Wars. We've done a lot of wrestling in the recent past too. So we're kind of going back to some of our roots. I mean, when you and I first met, we were both really heavy into video games. And I probably said this on the last podcast, but I'll go ahead and say it again. One of my first memories of you, my absolute very first memory of you, is walking by your dorm room on Teeter Thompson 5 back in Bloomington at IU. And I peeked in your room and you were playing Star Wars chess on your laptop, and I don't know why, but that memory has cemented itself inside of my brain. That is my very first picture of you in my head.
Wow.
Is playing a video game. So I mean, this is important, right? This is a big deal.
God, I haven't thought about that Star Wars chess game in forever and a day.
You remember that?
Yeah, I do. I remember it very well. You know, but it's funny that you equate video games to T5, because I guess now that I think about it, so do I. I mean, the first several weeks of getting to know kind of, these guys that at this point we've known for decades. Some of them we still, are in contact with, God, I remember just going from room to room and playing, Wolfenstein 3D, and there was there was a shoot 'em up game that Buford had.
I thought that was Doom or was Wolfenstein.
Well, he had Wolfenstein, but there was some like Mad Dog. It was a Western.
Oh, that Mad Dog McCree or something like that. Mad Dog McCree. It was one of those CD video games where it had actual crappy video footage, and oh my gosh, that's great. That's a good pull.
And then the Duke Nukems and Doom and just all that stuff. In fact, little side note that I'm assuming that you knew this. So I cannot remember the guy's name, but he lived at the entire opposite end of the floor from us, as far from us as you could live.
I sort of remember that. Yeah.
And for some reason, I wasn't even good friends with the guy. Obviously, I don't remember his name, but he was tripping balls one night.
Okay. All right.
And for some reason, I got caught babysitting him while he was coming down off his trip. Mm-hmm. And I proceeded to sit there and I played in his room Leisure Suit Larry.
Oh my God.
From beginning to end, I played the entire game while he was sitting there just tripping balls in his room.
Dude, that's crazy. I've never heard that story. You've
Really?
never told that to me. And that's hilarious because Leisure Suit Larry was a really raunchy game back before games, had a little bit more flexibility to be rated R, or before there was a rating system for video games, right? So that was sort of like an underground naughty thing to do when you were a kid. But that's hilarious. Like Leisure Suit Larry, man, I have not thought about that game in a minute.
And I have to say, like, this part of our conversation was not scripted. We didn't talk about it at all, and I didn't put Leisure Suit Larry's not on my list or anything like that. So.
Bummer. That's funny.
All right. Well, so just to kind of set the ground rules the way we did last time, really, there are no rules. It is PC, console, arcade, mobile games, any era, any type of game, basically no restrictions. If it's a video game, it is eligible for this list. And just real quick, you can go back and you can listen to us talk about it on episode 27, but I'll just give you real quick our top fives. My top five was GoldenEye 007, King's Quest 2, Diablo, Alex Kidd in Miracle World, and Miss Pac-Man. My honorable mention was Mario Kart 64. And Pip's top five was Grand Theft Auto Vice City, The Last of Us, The Legend of Zelda Link to the Past, Final Fantasy 2, and Miss Pac-Man at number one, as well as an honorable mention of Arkham Asylum. Real quick, just kind of getting that stuff out of the way, and we're off and running. So would you like to go first, or would you like me to go first tonight?
So I will go first only because I want you to go last. And I think that's more appropriate when I pick the topic, because it'll be fun for me to kind of see where you're going to end up. So yeah, I'll kind of kick things off with my number 10. So this one is probably the second oldest. Oh no, actually, as I'm looking through my notes, this game is the oldest one that's on my list. This was probably the first game that I ever played for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and it is Super Mario World from 1990. This was a fantastic first entry into the new 16-bit system. It was this typical Mario style 2D side-scrolling game that let the user explore so many different worlds, like this giant map, more so than ever before. It introduced us to Yoshi, which was the first time Mario got to jump on Yoshi, and he got to kind of hop around and eat things. And it was a completely new dynamic to this game, which was really fun. But the thing that I remember the most about getting this game was the graphics and the music were just like nothing we had ever experienced before. Because again, this was one of the first games that I ever played on the 16-bit system, which was a significant improvement over the 8-bit Nintendo Entertainment System. And I remember wanting this game so bad when I was in high school, or approaching, I think this is when I was in high school, and to the point where I was like having dreams about it. Like, every other night I was just so excited and couldn't imagine how amazing this was going to be. And I think I ended up getting a Super Nintendo that Christmas, and it didn't disappoint in any way. There's no relevant story to speak of. I mean, it's a Mario game, right? The princess gets captured and Mario has to go rescue her from Bowser. So, those games are pretty much all the same. But I tried to look up the games on my list on IGN's website because IGN did a top 100 list a while back. And this game actually ended up number 2 on this list out of the 100 games, which, much like our list, spanned pretty much every console, any time period. This was their number 2 game of all time, Super Mario World from the Super Nintendo Entertainment System.
Wow, I wish I would have. I'll have to pull up that list and see. I can't imagine any of my games will be on there, but that's really cool. And it's funny. So I believe we talked about it on the previous podcast. I wasn't a Nintendo guy. I was a Sega, PlayStation guy. That being said, if there's one Nintendo game that I probably played more than any other, it's this one.
Oh, good.
I don't know that I ever beat it. I don't know that I knew all the cheat codes and the warps and the this, that, and the other thing, but there was something about this game that was just so much more enjoyable to me than any of the other Mario any of the other games. And I really can't put my finger on what it was. And I probably only played the first, dozen levels or whatever. And I would just play those over and over and over again, because again, I'd go over to somebody's house and they would have it. I'd play it for a few minutes. But yeah, it's an amazing game. And I would imagine it holds up probably really, really well. I would
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've revisited it.
Yeah, if you like the more traditional side-scrolling games like that, this game absolutely does hold up. It had really great level design, and again, the music was great. It definitely graduated from Super Mario 3, which was the last Mario game, or I should say the previous Mario game to this particular one, and they really did a great job putting new and interesting worlds together that kept everything really, really fun and fresh. So yeah, fantastic game. But that being said, hey, give me your number 10.
My number 10 is by far and away the most recent game on my list. I think I'm going to have a much older list than you will. By far and away, this is the newest game on my list. It's a 2015. It's actually a mobile game that I still play to this day, and it is Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes.
Nice.
This is one of those games that I started playing, I think within the week it was released. I think it was released around November, late November in 2015. And this is one of these kind of turn-based mobile games. There's a zillion and one clones of them these days. But, you collect characters, you collect character shards, you collect armor, you collect different ability points and those kind of things. And I think that one of the things, in fact, I know one of the things that has kept me in this game is the fact that there's so many different things to collect. I come at this game from the collector's point of view. I've always been kind of a completionist, whether it was comic books or baseball cards or even video games, right? I rarely, in fact, I would even avoid video games because I knew that I couldn't put the time into them that it would require to beat the game. I think one of the games you talked about on our last podcast was the Grand Theft Auto stuff. I actually shied away from those games because I knew I wouldn't be able to rest until I got 100% on all missions and those kind of things. And so that's what has kind of kept me going on this game. There's several different game modes. There's an arena where you can battle against, other players. There's no real story mode in this one, but they've got guilds where you can work with other players. They've got battles, they've got wars, all kinds of stuff. It's gone through some ups and downs. If you play these mobile games long enough, you will start to see where the cash grabs come in. I don't pay to play this game. You can. Basically, what you're paying for in these types of games is you're either paying for gear or you're paying to speed up the game so that you can play more often. I don't do that. So this kind of becomes one of those games that, I'll check it in the morning, I'll check it at lunch, and I'll check it before I go to bed. And that's kind of my day. Sounds kind of boring, but it's a game that I've been playing now for like 8 years, and I still love it to this day.
That's crazy. I remember because I played this game too, and I remember when I was playing it, you were deep into it and way further ahead of it than I was. And I ended up quitting just because, like many of those mobile games that are really fun, the grind is just, it's overwhelming sometimes. And yeah, it's what I like to call a great toilet game. It's a great shitter game, right?
Yeah.
You gotta go take a shit. That you load this game up, you play it for 5 or 10 minutes and kind of move things along, and then you can just kind of go about your day. It's not one that, a lot of the video games on my list are the ones that you sit down and you actually play for like 2 hours at a time because they have such in-depth and involved storylines that you kind of have to do that to get any kind of real value out of them. This is more arcadey, if you will, and that it's sort of a quick hit. You can sit down, play it for 5 minutes, and then put it back down and kind of pick it back up. But that game was super fun. If you're a Star Wars fan, I don't know that you could find a game that has more of the Star Wars universe brought into this world. It's crazy, from the stuff that is canon to the stuff that probably is no longer canon. I mean, it's got all of these characters that you can use, and there's a ton of strategy behind all the battles and everything. And it was a really, really fun game. I can only imagine where I would be right now if I had stuck with that game. And I can't even imagine where you are. And just a little side note, this is really funny because I think we were in the same, weren't we in the same like guild or whatever it was called?
We were.
Yeah. Right. And the guild got busted because there was somebody in the guild who actually worked for the company. and he started giving away free shit to us, and he got busted for that, and that was really awesome because we got super powerful characters, and then we got them all ripped out, and somebody got suspended. I don't remember all the details, but that was that was a really interesting sort of experience with that game. But I agree, that's fantastic. That's a really great pick.
All right, sir. What do you got for your numbers? What is it? 9?
All right, so my number 9 is probably, it's not the newest game, but it's another pretty new game on my list. And this is a game that really, in my opinion, is the flagship game for this particular platform. This is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild for the Nintendo Switch. It came out in 2017. And what really makes this game special, it's a really immersive open world 3D adventure where you get to collect gear and solve puzzles and scale the highest mountains and glide down them afterwards. And it's very, very non-linear, but it's still really engaging, which is a compliment that I can't give a lot of games. I think I tend to prefer the games that are a little bit more linear with minimal side quests, just because I like to really understand the story and I don't have enough discipline to stick with it. So if it kind of makes me stick with it, then I tend to stay more engaged. But there are games like Fallout or some of the complete open world games where you can just go anywhere and do anything. I actually get bored with really quick because I really want to know the story. I want to know what they want to tell me about this. And The Legend of Zelda did such an amazing job of balancing both of those, the Breath of the Wild game. There's so many Easter eggs, there's so many dungeons and weapons, and a very interesting system of getting weapons and then improving them, and then they break after a while, and so much exploration. And it's a crazy awesome game. It's super fun, and the Switch is the perfect console for that game to be on. And if I'm going back to the IGN list that I referred to earlier, this is actually the number 1 game on their top 100 list. It received virtually perfect scores from pretty much every game review site that ever came out, and may in fact be the best Nintendo game that has ever been created. I still like a couple other ones a little bit more than this, but man, when I played through it, it was just an incredible experience.
Wow, that's awesome. I don't have a Switch, so I've never played this game. In fact, my this is going to blow your mind. My experience with any of the Zelda games is really, really minimal, because again, I didn't have a Nintendo. And even when I would go over to somebody's house that had a Nintendo, the Zelda games were not the ones that you would just kind of pick up and start playing, right? Because you really did need to kind of invest that time, and kind of sit with it and work your way through it. That being said, I'm very familiar with with those worlds. I didn't realize it was that good. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't realize it would be to the top of the IGN list. That's interesting. I might, my wife will kill me, but I might have to buy a Switch and try that one.
Hey, if one of us can buy a new console out of this, I think that's a win for this podcast for sure. But yeah, the Switch is it's a great platform. It's a great console, and to be able to play this kind of game on it is really fun. And it's fantastic. It makes really good use of the wireless Joy-Con controllers and everything, and it's sort of a hybrid between a standard console and the Wii. It really does a good job of using the high points of that system to enhance that game. So it's cool. Fantastic. Yeah,
that's awesome.
So tell me your number 9 on your list, sir.
My number 9 is, let me look at my years, is not the oldest game on my list, but it's close. It is a 1985 cabinet game. It is, I believe, one of the very first 4-player cabinet games. This is a fantasy hack and slash known as Gauntlet. I with the exception of Miss Pac-Man, I might have pumped more quarters into Gauntlet than any other arcade game in history. If you're not familiar with it, it's a top-down view dungeon crawl. You can choose one of 4 characters. You've got a wizard, you've got an archer, like
a barbarian, I think, and some sort of wizard, maybe.
Yeah. again, it's just a hack and slash. There's very little skill to it other than pumping quarters into it to regrow, regain your health. But there's something about that game that just kind of caught my eye at the right age when I was growing up. And I really have kind of loved that game ever since. There was a not too long ago, as part of the PlayStation Network, you can, when you can join and you get free games. There actually was a new updated version of Gauntlet that was one of the free games one month, which was brought back a lot of really good memories. I can't really say enough about it's an old school kind of 8-bit or 16-bit cabinet game, but every time if I do run across it these days, I always have to stop and play for half an hour. So I love it.
Yeah, I think that's a great choice. That game, the top-down aspect of it is really interesting because I don't feel like we played a lot of games like that before, but it was super fun, and one that I feel like can only truly be enjoyed as a multiplayer experience. Like
Yes.
a single player, it's just not as fun. It doesn't work. It doesn't translate as well. So I would say that requires friends to be there in order to have fun. But that's a really solid game. I like that game.
All right. What, sir, do you have for your number 8?
So my number 8 is another new-ish kind of game. And this is actually a sequel of my honorable mention from my top 5 list. This is Batman's Arkham Knight, which came out for the PlayStation 4 back in 2015. This is the 4th game in the series following Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, and Arkham Origins. This is basically a very similar style to the previous one that I mentioned. It's a third-person detective melee combat styled game that's just completely entrenched into the lore of Gotham City. It features the voice talents of Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill as the Joker, which is just so much fun. Like, I can't even Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill, obviously famous for their voice acting in the animated series, but they bring a much different dimension to this game. It's so much darker and so much more interesting. There are Easter eggs within Easter eggs in this game, and it's just so much fun. It introduces new fightable villains such as Firefly and Man-Bat and Deathstroke and Killer Croc and even the Arkham Knight himself, which I won't go into because it's a big part of the story for anybody listening who may end up playing that game. The identity of the Arkham Knight is really one of the most fun things to uncover as you're playing that game. One of my favorite parts about the whole thing, though, is that there was some DLC that included some skins that you could use from the old school 60s Batman. So like if you wanted to dress your Batman up as Adam West, you could do that. If you wanted to put him in 1989's Michael Keaton Batman suit with the sort of the black suit with the ovular yellow and black logo, like you could do that. And you could use the old Tim Burton Batmobile to drive around the city. Like, it was really cool. It had a lot of other skins from many other comic book based iterations of that character, but it's just such a fun, intriguing mystery as Batman tracks down the identity and the motive from the Arkham Knight. And it took everything that had come before that and definitely cranked it up to 11. And it's such a good game. They have a sequel of sorts coming out for it pretty soon, which will not feature Batman himself, but will feature the cast of characters around him, like Nightwing and Robin and Batgirl and Red Hood, I think is one of them. Mm-hmm. So very similar styled game without Batman in it. Spoiler alert, there's a reason for that at the end of this Arkham Knight game. And it's fantastic. And I can't wait to play the next one.
That's awesome. So 2 questions about the Arkham series, because you had one on your honorable mention and you've got this one here. So you clearly love the series and you're a connoisseur of the series. So 2 questions. One is, do they build upon one another? So meaning, do I need to play the previous ones before I play a subsequent one to really get the most enjoyment out of it? And then the second question would be, what sort of a time commitment am I looking at if I want to sit down and play, and play it the way that I would play it, meaning I have to beat every single thing. I have to do 100%.
Yeah. Well, so those are good questions. So the answer to your first question is yeah, if you're interested in getting involved in these games, I would start at the beginning, and that is Arkham Asylum. And that game, much like the others, it's very similar to the common types of games like this these days, where there's a main quest and there's a lot of side quests. So if you want to open up everything, it's going to take time for sure. But it's also one of those games you can pick up and put down, whenever you want to, and it's pretty easy to get back into the groove of everything. But I would say, it's going to take a significant amount of time to get through each game, but it's definitely worth it. And I would say I haven't looked lately, but last time I checked, you can buy all three. Actually, I think you could buy all the games on the PlayStation Network as a bundle for a really reasonable price. Like, I don't know, 40 or $50 maybe well, so let me take a step back. So Arkham Origins that was actually made by a different developer or different publisher, I think. So it's part of the series, but kind of not really. I never played it. I haven't seen any bit of it. It doesn't really follow the same storyline. So really, you've only got 3 games you need to worry about if you want to get into this series: Arkham Asylum, the sequel Arkham City, skip the Origins one and go right to Arkham Knight. And they do build on each other because there are key character moments that won't make sense if you go right to the PS4 version of that. But again, these games are all old enough that you can get them on the cheap and play through them at your leisure. And it's 100% worth it. They are so much fun. And someone like you, especially, I know that you were a comic fan, and I know that you love Batman. It gets so deep into the Batman universe. It's crazy. And again, so many Easter eggs, so many fun things to just discover on your own, that it's worth the time to go through all this stuff.
So I'm gonna say something that's really gonna like bum you out and piss you off at the same time. I'm sitting here and I'm going through my PlayStation receipts, right? So back in February of 2017, I bought something off PlayStation called Batman Return to Arkham, which includes the original 2 games. And I have never played them.
Oh no.
That's terrible. So I guess the good news is I have them, and I can go.
You can at least start the series. No, ain't nothing wrong with that. I hope you didn't pay too much for them, because you can probably get the 3 games cheaper from what you paid for the 2.
I probably could, but I'm pretty sure now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure my oldest son played them. So it's not like I bought them and nobody played them. So
I think if like, I know you don't spend as much time playing video games as I do these days, but I think that if you're ever interested in sitting down and just investing yourself into a storyline, between your millions of baseball games and stuff that I know you've got to deal with. Yeah. This is the one on my list, on your list, anything. I would put this above and beyond everything else that you have. I would prioritize this as number 1. Get into this series, because I think that you will love it.
Okay, cool. That's awesome. That excites me, because that's, especially since I already own it. So that's something that I would definitely
there you go. You have no excuse, like absolutely none.
Right.
Practically begging you. But that being said, what is your number 8?
My number 8. Okay, so this is going to come. This is back at a time when I actually had time to sit down and invest. This is a 1995 PC game developed by Blizzard Entertainment, and it is Warcraft 2: Tides of Darkness. This game is one of those kind of real-time strategy computer games. There is a zillion and one, I won't call them clones, but games that came after this: Command and Conquer, Civilization, Age of Empires, and then StarCraft is probably the one that is probably more well-known than even Warcraft. This is a game where these real-time strategy games where basically you go around, you collect resources, you build buildings, you build units, and you go to war. This game in particular, I remember I played this game a ton in college, and more specifically the kind of add-on to it, which was called Warcraft 2 Beyond the Dark Portal. And that particular add-on added just a couple more missions. But I remember I used to, again, I'm a completionist. So not only would I play through the campaign, but I would go out of my way to use up every single last resource on the board, on the entire map. So I would chop down every tree, mine every bit of ore, every bit of oil, I would build every ship I could, and just cause, right. And I would leave one little guy there from the enemy, and I would not kill him so that I could keep my game going until I literally chop down every tree on every single board. I don't know why, but I loved playing this game that way. It was amazing. I wasted so much time on it, but it was great.
I'm thinking there's a fine line between completionism and OCD. I mean, you tell me.
I think you're probably right.
No, it's funny. That's a great choice, because I remember that game. I remember you introducing me to that game. We lived in North Lane at the time, if I remember correctly. And this is when we lived upstairs and we shared a bedroom, and you had that computer. And I remember playing Warcraft on that computer. I thought that was Warcraft 3, but maybe it was Warcraft 2. And this was my first introduction into RTS, real-time strategy games.
Yep.
And I thought, wow, this is really cool. This is such a different dynamic. It's not just hack and slash, it's point and click. You have to kind of think about what you're going to do. You got to go mine this in order to build this. And then you take that thing that you built and you go and you destroy the enemy. And all the while you have to kind of be on your guard, or else the enemy might destroy you. And it was just a really interesting, different kind of approach to those kind of video games. And you mentioned StarCraft. I ended up buying that game. The StarCraft 2 actually is what it was, a handful of years ago. And I did that for the sole purpose of sort of reliving that experience of having played Warcraft. And it was so much fun. And this was really before it really got to be the World of Warcraft, like the online MMO stuff. And that doesn't interest me as much. But Warcraft is, the first one, the second one, and the third one are all games that I feel like are very replayable in so many ways, and you can still download them for super cheap these days on a modern PC and play these games, and they're super fun. So that's a really cool choice.
And you know what? I also loved that the world that it was in, right? It was orcs and wizards and very, very kind of Lord of the Rings-esque. I really enjoyed that world. All right.
So, hence your gauntlet obsession as well, right?
Exactly.
There's a theme here.
There is. All right, sir. What do you got for number 7?
This is hopefully kind of a cool transition. You talked about, Warcraft 2 being one of the games that, we played in college. And this next game for me was the epitome of college and playing games. And I was so scared that you were going to name drop this earlier. And I'm thinking you didn't, for one of two reasons. Either A, you knew it might be on my list, or B, it's on yours and we just haven't gotten there yet. But in December of 1991, the greatest and probably the last greatest Nintendo game dropped, and that is Super Tecmo Bowl. It is such a fucking great game. It is. This game, I fell in love with it the minute I opened it and played it. I remember this like it was yesterday. It was Christmas time, 1991, and my parents had got me this game and they let me open it on Christmas Eve, and I must have played it for 4 straight hours. Like, it was amazing. This was, bear in mind, for those of you listening, this is before the Madden games ever came out. So Tecmo Bowl was the first real quality football game that had ever come out for any system. And then this was, of course, the sequel. This was Super Tecmo Bowl. So this is the first game to actually incorporate seasons and playoffs and injuries and championships and all that stuff. And it was mind-blowing. I mean, it just took my fandom of football, it took it to a new level, and it was so much fun. My team of choice was the Buffalo Bills. They were, in my opinion, the best team on that game. Jim Kelly and Thurman Thomas and James Lofton and Bruce Smith on the defense. Like, they were just ferocious, and it was great. And I think, honestly, the last really great Nintendo game that was ever created, I think that might have been it. And I mentioned the correlation to this in college. This was a staple of my memories on Teeter Thompson 5, our freshman year of college, because this was the one game that everybody knew, everybody had, everybody loved, and everybody played. And we would gather in one room and we would pick our teams and we would have a Super Tecmo Bowl tournament. And it would be so funny because inevitably somebody would want to play and the person that they had to play was at class and everybody was pissed off about it. And it's like, who's up on Tecmo was the big thing that was always, shot around our dorm floor. But it was so much fun. And it is a special place in my heart for this game. Might have ended up on my top 5 if I'd have really thought that one through, just for emotional reasons. But I'm playing this game on my phone right now called Retro Bowl, which is very, very much styled like Tecmo Bowl, only it has a little bit of a different dynamic where you can be more of a general manager role and you can sign players and improve them over time. But it's a very similar, touchscreen based version of Tecmo Bowl, which is really, really fun. So there's something very special about that format that really holds up and is very endearing, even gosh, how many years later? Is it 31 years later at this point? Yeah. Oh my God. But what a game. Super Tecmo Bowl. Fantastic.
Yeah. So the reason I didn't mention it earlier, that is one of my honorable mentions. Okay. Super Tecmo Bowl was, it was amazing. And again, I wasn't a Nintendo guy, but to your point and to your story, how many seasons of Super Tecmo Bowl did we play on T5? So I mean, we would just go one after another. And, every single team was spoken for. I remember very vividly one season I had the New England Patriots, which at that time was a terrible, this is Tom Brady was in college still at the time. But I remember the running back was a guy by the name of Mosey Tutupu. And I will never forget that name because he was my running back. And I also remember you mentioned being pissed that somebody was at class when they were up. I remember there was one time when Chris Whistle was up to play and it was his turn and he was like, no, I gotta go to class. And we basically hounded him into staying and skipping his class so that he could play his next thing. I also remember, and I can't remember who you were playing against, but you had Flipper Wilson. You were playing as the Rams. And,
I was trying to remember who I got stuck with, and you're right, it was the Rams.
You were playing, and I can't remember who you were playing, but you were by far the underdog. Like the Rams sucked in that game, and you were playing whoever was like, and it was, I don't know if it was the Super Bowl or a playoff game, and you caught a touchdown. And I remember you were egging whoever this was on, and you were going, you call him Flipper. And
they called him Flipper.
And you caught a touchdown. And whoever it was, I'm pretty sure either threw down the remote or slammed the door. I can't remember what it was, but they were so pissed at you. And it was just, I don't remember who it was, but I just remember very vividly you were playing with the Rams and you were playing with Flipper Wilson.
Oh, that's awesome. I do remember Flipper, and I do remember because I was trying to think what was the shitty team that I got stuck with, and I thought it was Tampa Bay at first, but no, you're right, it was the Rams, and I don't even remember. God, I don't remember who else was on that team, but now I got to go look it up. But it was so much fun, man. That was such a good time. All right, so your number 7, please.
My number 7 is another game that you will remember very well, I would imagine, from our time at North Lane. This is a game, I'm pretty sure I bought this game maybe the day that I came, like after my parents dropped me off. And so it was probably we went to the mall. This was called Hot Shots Golf. And I believe it was Hot Shots Golf 3. And so this was a game, it was a very animated version of golf. So there was no pro golfers, there was nobody that you would know, but it was, you could kind of build up your golfer, you could get new abilities. It was a very cartoonish version of the game of golf, but for whatever reason I went all in on that game and I just had so much fun playing it. In doing some research, I didn't realize, so now it was actually, the name of the franchise was actually called Everybody's Golf, which I had never realized. That's what it was called in North America. And so Hot Shots Golf was what they called it when they released it for the PlayStation 2 at the time. I can't really describe how much fun it was to play this game. And I think it was because it wasn't a super hyper realistic version of golf. It was because it was a little bit cartoony. In fact, I remember they didn't have any actual like licensed names, but there was one guy in there that was clearly John Daly. It was 100%. The graphics looked like him. He swung like him. That was the guy that you were looking to kind of unlock. You know, you would play and play and play, and then I can't even remember what you needed to do. In fact, just before the podcast, I went downstairs and I do still have my copy of Hot Shots Golf 3 and Hot Shots Golf 4. So,
oh wow, nice.
I might have to see if my PlayStation still works, and might have to. Hey, you know what? Maybe when you come here next month, we can pop those in and see.
Hey, how about that? That'd be good. Or maybe I'll bring some Tecmo Bowl or something, and if we can go at it circa 1991. But that's a great choice. I do remember Hot Shots Golf. I remember it mostly, I think, Hot Shots Golf 2 for the PlayStation 2, because that was, I think, the first game I ever got on a PlayStation 2 console. And I agree with you. Like, the fact that it wasn't hyper realistic, it was very animated and it was easy. It's just like click the button and then click it again to hit the ball, but you have to, factor in the wind and the various other elements. That is what made it really cool and really fun. And I think that each person had like sort of a special hit or something like that. There were some very over the top animated pieces of it, but it was a really fun game, and it was very engaging. It was just really cool to play.
All right, sir. You are at where you at? You're at your number 6. You're at your last one.
I am at my number 6. And I got to admit, I thought for a hot second there, you were going to go with World Series Baseball 94. And we were going to have to talk about Hector Fajardo, but I mean, what a game that was. How many times did we get drunk and come back and play World Series Baseball and listen to Jacko Pierce? I mean,
all the time.
All the time?
Yes, all the time.
It was like, that's probably the only reason I remember is because we did it so often. So my number 6 is, and it's probably the newest game on my list, actually, and it's one that is going to see a sequel released in November, which I'm very, very excited about. This came out 2018. This is God of War for the PlayStation 4. God of War is, one of the most consistently amazing games and series that has ever been created. It's a third-person action game. It's got a really brilliant fighting system. It's kind of hack and slash, to be honest, but they have a lot of different combinations of buttons, and you have to kind of tailor that to the style of enemy that you're fighting. But this is the 8th installment in the series. I got hip to it via the PlayStation when the original God of War came out, and then they had a second and a third one, and then other versions came out on other platforms. But this version is really the epitome of how great this game is. It was really inspired by Norse mythology, which previous games were really based more on Greek mythology. So there was, just a quick sidetrack. The second God of War game featured the character Perseus. And Perseus, from my perspective, I knew Perseus from one of my favorite movies growing up, which was the old Clash of the Titans movie. And Harry Hamlin, who played Perseus in the movie, came back to voice Perseus in the God of War game, which was just really cool and a neat little Easter egg. But this new game is really based more in the world of Norse mythology. So this includes, very familiar topics to what we see these days in the Marvel movies. So we've got the 9 realms with Asgard and Jotunheim and Midgard and all of those. And, you'll see a cameo by Thor in this game. And it's just really cool. One of the neatest things about this game is that it's sort of, we'll say filmed. It's filmed as a one shot. So the game never breaks. The game is constant. It doesn't do cutscene. I mean, it has cutscenes, but every cutscene rolls into the next series of scenes. So like a one shot in a movie is when the camera never stops, right? It follows the characters around. This entire game is a one shot game. And it's crazy how well it flows together. And once you start the game, you don't have any obnoxious load times, which is really, really an attractive quality about a game like this. somewhat linear, but there are a ton of side quests that you can go on. So it's really fun to kind of explore and, look for all the different ways you can upgrade your armor and your weapons and things like that. It's got a really, really good score. It's done by a guy named Bear McCreary, I think, who worked on The Walking Dead, which I thought was really interesting. And it ranks at number 25 on IGN's top 100 list. But this game has a sequel called God of War Ragnarok that's coming out in November, which will be a PS5 game specifically. And I did recently acquire a PS5, which I'm really excited about. And this will probably be the game to play on this system because it's going to take advantage of the high frame rates and all of that. And it's going to be so much fun. But this game is fantastic, super engaging God of War for the PlayStation 4.
So that actually is one of the few games on your list that I have played. I haven't played it extensively. I just remember, and I can't recall, like, even if there was a specific name, but he had a specific weapon that there was a chain attached to it, right? And he could throw it and use it as a stabbing weapon. Am I remembering correctly?
Yeah. So in the first three games, they were like swords that were attached to chains that were tied to his wrists that were sort of his punishment. Like I think if memory serves, and I could be wrong, I think the God of War Ares had punished him by making him the God of War, basically attaching these weapons to his wrists. In this new game, he doesn't, I think he gets them eventually, but he does not start out with them. He starts with an axe, which is really cool because he just kind of chucks it around and uses it to do various sorts of melee combat. But the older games kind of started with these other weapons that are sort of tied to him, and he slings them back and forth. Think of it sort of like a whip, only a whip with a giant sword on the end. So it's very fantastical, but it really is so much fun.
Gotcha. No, that's an awesome pick. Okay, so we've come to my number 6.
Yes.
And I again, this is another one. This is another PC game. It was in 1993. It was released by a company called Maxis. It's another game that I played a ton when I was in college, and it's called SimCity 2000.
Oh, wow. That's a good one.
So SimCity is kind of just what it sounds like. It's a city building simulation game. Basically, you start with a completely blank slate, a countryside or a mountainside, and you start building your city. And so you are building out infrastructure, you're building out roads, you're building out power, you're determining where residential sits next to industrial, sits next to retail, and those kind of things. You're putting in airports, and if you've got the appropriate topography of your land, you might be able to put in hydropower, you might be able to put in wind power and those kind of things. There's no real goal other than to grow your city and to keep your Sims happy. So this is, obviously the predecessor of a lot of the Sim games, which in the subsequent games, you're actually taking care of the people. At this one, though, you're taking care of the entire town. There was an original game just called SimCity Classic, which this was to say this was a leap forward is not doing it justice. The graphics were better, the gameplay was better. This one introduced the concept of scenarios, so you could actually unleash a fire on your town. You could unleash a Martian from outer space that would come down and do all sorts of damage, and then you would have to recover from that and those kind of things. But this is just one of those games that for whatever reason, it just really kind of clicked with me and I fell in love with it. There really was no way to beat this game. There wasn't a victory sequence other than there was a thing called, and I had to look it up, there was a thing called an Exodus. And so if you got to the year 2051 or later in the game, there was something called an arcology. And arcology was essentially a city within a city. If you placed 300 of these arcologies, they would all launch and they would all take off and basically leave, and presumably to go into outer space and colonize other worlds. And that would basically reset you, and you would be left with only what you had without the 300 arcology. So I did manage to get there once. Again, I'm a completionist, but I loved this game. I spent so many hours and I never got bored with it, even though I was just like building a town. So SimCity 2000.
That's cool. That was a game that I definitely played. I don't know if I got addicted to it, but man, I could totally understand how somebody gets addicted to it, because there's just so much logic behind how to build that perfect city, right? And it was really addictive to try to, if you're a puzzle solver, if you're the kind of person who likes to pick things apart and understand how they work, that kind of game is really, really well suited for you. But yeah, that's a really interesting choice. I haven't thought about those SimCity games for a long time, but they were a lot of fun and super addictive for sure.
So it's time. You said you had a couple honorable mentions. I already mentioned one of mine, which was Super Tecmo Bowl. What do you got?
My first one is Super Metroid, which is the 1994 sequel to the NES classic, the original Metroid game. Super Metroid really took all the great aspects of the first game and enhanced them in a way that made this universe so much fun. And, I think I used the term Metroidvania in the previous podcast, and, which is really a term that derived its name from this game, as a style of game where you basically have a very specific sized map, but you have to sort of go through it, and you can't access all the parts of all the map, and you kind of have to revisit a lot of parts to be able to go back and open up different levels and weapons and all that kind of thing. And this game did such a really good job of that, and it was creepy and it was weird. And it was just really fun and addictive, because you can play that game 100 times, but you'll never play it the same way twice because of how you can get from one point to the other. So that was my first one. And my second one is the oldest game on the list, and one that kind of sort of sits in my basement right now. It is 1982's Burger Time by Data East. That one will always hold a very special place in my heart. It's the only game on my list today that actually originated as an old school arcade game. And there's no plot. There's nothing really that interesting to go into. It's this little guy, I think his name is Peter Pepper, that runs around and tries to make hamburgers by walking over the various pieces, all the while being chased by the various condiments that make it up. And I don't know how anybody pitches this game, because that sentence that just came out of my mouth was like the dumbest thing that I've even ever heard. But it was a really fun game. It's incredibly difficult. It's really tough, but it's got a special place in my heart. And it's one that, if much like your Gauntlet, if I ever end up at a arcade or a barcade, then I will make my way to the Burger Time machine, and I will see Ken's name at the top, because Ken's name is always at the top of the damn Burger King high score list, or Burger King, the Burger Time high score list. And I will always play that game until I knock Ken off his ass, because that just, that's my goal. But so those are my two honorable mentions: Super Metroid for the Super NES and Burger Time from the old school arcade unit.
So yeah, we mentioned Tecmo Super Bowl, so I won't belabor that point. I will bring you two other ones though. So my first one will be a 1982 Atari 2600 game.
Whoa.
Yep, called Pitfall.
Oh wow.
Pitfall is, in retrospect, is a really kind of boring side scroller. I believe there are 255 screens in total that you can get through, and I don't believe you can never beat it. I think Pitfall 2 was might have been the first Atari game that you actually could beat. But this one, you follow Pitfall Harry, and basically you're going through the jungle, you're jumping over snakes and rocks and quicksand, and you're swinging on vines and this, that, and the other thing. This one holds a special place in my heart. There was must have been an Atari fan club or something that I was a member of in the 80s. And there was a contest where you could send in a picture of you with your high score, and whoever won, you would win something. And I remember I played, again, this is before you couldn't save, you couldn't pause, there was none of that. You just had to go down and play. And I remember I was sitting in my basement and I must have played that game for 3 or 4 hours, which at the time was a long time. Scrolling left, jump, scrolling left, duck, scroll, that kind of thing. And I remember my mom took a picture of me and we sent it in. And of course I never heard anything, but I was really, really happy with my high score. I was like, oh, I'm going to win. I'm going to make it. So I got a special place in my heart for Pitfall and Pitfall Harry.
Yeah. Pitfall is a fantastic game. And I mean, you can see this because we're on a video Zoom call right now, or you can't really see it, but it's in the background. My guitar case has a patch on it. It's the Pitfall Explorers badge. So if you remember, Activision had a promotion of some kind back in the day where if you took your picture next to a high score and you send it in, they send you a patch where they would do it for all the Activision games. And there's a Pitfall one, and I got it off of eBay. I didn't earn it the right way. I just bought it. And it's glued onto the side of my guitar case, and as in homage to Pitfall Harry and some of my favorite Atari 2600 games. So that's such a great choice.
That's awesome. That now that you think about it, that must have been what I was trying to get, was that patch. That must have been,
I think it was
what I was trying to go after. Yeah. And then my other one, then, since Tecmo we already talked about, was a PlayStation game. It's actually a 2002 game developed by IO Interactive and published by Eidos. It was called Hitman 2 Silent Assassin. The Hitman games I absolutely fell in love with. And again, kind of the same way that I played the Warcraft games, I didn't really play the Hitman games the way they were intended. As the name would suggest, you are a hitman. You have missions where you need to go around and kill your target. The idea, though, in that it absolutely was not a hack and slash, and it was not just a button smash. Like, you had to be really deliberate in terms of how you went around and how you carried out your mission. Because if somebody caught you, somebody saw you, then the cops would come and then you couldn't get away. You kind of lost your mission. So I would do that, but I would take it one step further and I would kill literally everybody on the entire level. But I would do it in a stealthy way so that I never got caught, but I would kill every single character on every single level. But the Hitman games, there are several of them. There was 2 or 3, maybe even more than that, sequels after this. They got to the point where the scenarios just got really, really super elaborate. And I've actually, as I was doing some research for this podcast, I went and I watched some of the cut scenes and some of the death scenes. They're amazing. I would love to go back and start to play some of those games, because I just have such fond memories of this particular entry into the series. They did actually make 2, I think, movies of the Hitman character. The first one starred Timothy Oliphant, believe it or not, as the Hitman, Agent 47. And then I think there's another one that they totally replaced the entire cast. But that's another one of those things that if you didn't play the game and enjoy the game, you probably wouldn't enjoy the movie. But I did. And so I did. So Hitman, Silent Assassin.
Yeah, that's a really good choice. I don't know if I played that one. I think I played Hitman 3 on the PlayStation 4. And I agree with you. Like, the thing that I like the most about this game is that it's very opposite of a lot of the ones on my list. It's not hack and slash. It's not a button masher. It's something that makes you think through, it puts you in a scenario, right? Like, you get dropped in this level and you have to assassinate a certain person, but you've got to do it a certain way. And you have to know which direction to go to get to this person and what obstacles to overcome. And sometimes you have to poison them, sometimes you have to electrocute them, and it becomes like, oh, talk about a completionist nightmare. I mean, there's so many different ways to do all of these things, and those games are so much fun. So I love that choice. That's a really good one.
Yeah. So at this point, we're done. We made it through 6 through 10, and as well as a couple honorable mentions. I tell you what, this podcast and even the previous one has taught me, I need to find some more time in my days for some gaming. I just don't do it right now. Other than my one mobile game that was on this list, I really don't play many video games these days.
Well, it's probably not a bad thing. I mean, you like me are a guy in your mid 40s and you have a family and things to attend to. So yeah, I mean, it's probably best that you don't spend most of your time doing that. And I certainly don't spend most of my time doing that. But if my wife had a say in it, she would probably see a lot less of my doing that. But yeah, it's so much fun. And I think that if you do carve out the time, there is a world of games out there that you haven't even scratched the surface on that I think that you would get so enveloped in that it would be so much fun. It would be good to revisit this in maybe a year and say, hey, you know, did you have a chance to play any of these games? And if you did, I feel like you and I have enough in common that you would appreciate the same things about some of these games that I did.
For sure. All right. Well, it's that time. It's time to wrap it up. You got any parting thoughts before we go, or we're going to put a bow on this one?
Well, here's what I'll say is that you're going to be up next. So you put me on the spot last time. You're the one that's going to pick the next topic. So you know, choose wisely is all I can say. That I'm excited to figure out where this goes from here. We talked about this in the last podcast, and I want to say it again because I think it's definitely fair to assume that at some point we have Halloween on the horizon, not just the movie, but the season of Halloween. And you and I are certainly known for being fans of that genre of film. And I'm sure our friends at Scare Tissue would appreciate it if we did some sort of topics surrounding that, because this is the time of year when I start watching a lot of scary movies. In fact, October 1 is when I start putting in a scary movie like every night. And my wife gets so pissed off about it. But I'm like, sorry, this is the time of year. And I listen to
season, right?
You know, John Carpenter on Spotify, and I really kind of go all out. So I'm sure that we're going to have to come up with some Halloween themed content for some future episodes, including the review of the next Halloween movie, which we did talk about. And I'm excited to get to that, as well as some other scary movies.
Yeah, for sure. In kind of other exciting news, we are less than a month from when you are coming to Cleveland again, which is super exciting. So
it's amazing. And I'm pretty sure we'll make an arrangement of some kind to do our second live in-person podcast, this time in your house versus mine.
Yes. And I promise I won't fall asleep watching the Royal Rumble again.
I don't believe you. I don't believe you at all, but it'll be worth it. Either way.
All right. On that note, my name is Chewie. I've been joined by Mr. Pip. This has been the 411 from 406. We'll see you down the road, folks. Thanks. Take care.
Adios.